On my father's birthday, my own parents forbade me from going to the family dinner. They said there would be no celebration at all to hide the fact that my favorite sister was introducing a new boyfriend to everyone but me. I thought it was strange, but I respected it. Until I video called to congratulate her, and my mother answered just to humiliate me in front of everyone, saying she was embarrassed just looking at me. But what she didn't expect was that her boyfriend, upon hearing my voice, would come over to see who was on the screen and say, "Hello, principal." At that moment, everyone was shocked. They didn't know who I had become, and they would bitterly regret everything they did to me. Hello, welcome to the Amazing Stories channel. Like and subscribe to this channel, enjoy, and turn on notifications. Comment here which city you're watching from. I'd love to know, and I'd love to leave a heart in your comment. Throughout my life, I've learned to live with the shadow of my parents' preference for my younger sister. From a young age, she was treated like the jewel of the house, the untouchable princess, while I was the daughter left to fend for myself. I grew up being told I was cold, difficult, and different. When I tried to understand why I was treated with such distance, my mother told me that some children are simply born that way without much sparkle. That's how I saw myself before them, a dull being compared to the brilliance of my beloved daughter. Over time, I began to distance myself. I finished college far from home, landed an internship that consumed me but made me proud. I worked day and night to climb the ladder, and I did. In silence, I built something of my own, without support, without applause, without a "we're proud of you" message. When my sister needed something, anything, all it took was a request. Her wish was an order. But when I was the one in need, the answer was always the same: "You can do it, you're not dependent like your sister." That was the bitterest compliment I could ever receive. In recent years, contact had become almost non-existent. My attempts at rapport were always cold, quick, and formal. They seemed to have no real interest in who I was or what I was doing with my life. And yet, a part of me still insisted on wanting some recognition, some acceptance. No matter how much I'd learned to live without it, it never stopped hurting. So a few days before my father's birthday, I decided to take the initiative. I called my mother to ask if there would be any kind of celebration. She replied curtly that they wouldn't do anything, that my father didn't want parties or lunches, that they were in a more introspective phase. I thought it was strange, but I didn't question it. Her voice was harsher than usual, and I could tell between the lines that something was off, but I swallowed hard and accepted it. But deep down, I knew. On their birthday, even though I had the nagging certainty that they'd lied, I decided to video call them to congratulate them. Maybe somehow it would touch them. When my mother answered, what I saw was what I feared. A set table laden with food, smiling guests, laughter in the background, a real, complete celebration, a party. And I wasn't there, not by choice, but because they had decided to erase me from their existence that day. "You don't understand that you're no longer welcome here," my mother said, her gaze cold and arrogant. "Just looking at you makes me feel ashamed. Don't ruin your father's day, please don't show up again." The silence was instantaneous. I saw the faces of relatives looking at me, whispering. I felt exposed, humiliated, rejected like never before. And then, before I could end the call, a new face appeared behind my mother, curious about the situation. A young, elegant man approached to see who she was talking to. When he saw me, his eyes widened. And to everyone's surprise, he said, "Hello, director." The room was shocked. The silence was so profound that the clinking of cutlery on the table could be heard. My mother went pale, my father froze, and my sister simply froze, as if the ground had dropped out from under her feet. This man, whom my sister had brought to introduce as her new boyfriend, knew me, and more than that, he respected me. It wasn't just any recognition, it was a formal, respectful greeting from someone who knew exactly who I was and the weight of the position I held. They didn't know. None of them knew what I had become. Because they never cared to know, and it was in that moment, in that split second, that everything changed. My story with my family's rejection is long, full of wounds and painful silences. But what they didn't know, what they never imagined, was that the daughter they had neglected had become the CEO of one of the largest companies in the country. Yes, that daughter who, according to my mother, was embarrassing just to look at. The dinner that should have been a celebration of the patriarch became the stage for the beginning of an emotional earthquake. They had denied me, lied to me, despised me. And now it would be their turn to hear, or rather feel, the weight of regret. Because the principal they had disowned was no longer the quiet girl who accepted their contempt in silence. And this story, oh, this story is just beginning. That night, after hanging up the video call, I felt a strange mix of emotions. My heart was still pounding, not because of my mother's contempt, I knew that well, but because of the reaction of the man my sister had brought to introduce the family. He recognized me immediately, and more than that, he called me director with a demeanor of respect, even surprise. It was clear he had no idea I was his girlfriend's rejected sister. And clearly, my family had no idea he worked directly with me either. I spent the night awake, my mind spinning in circles. I tried to remember where I knew him from. Had I seen that face in the company hallways? At meetings? At presentations? It was hard to remember them all. Ever since I was promoted to executive director, my day-to-day life was filled with important decisions, off-site meetings, and travel. So many names, so many faces. But there was something familiar about him, and I knew that wouldn't be the last time we'd see each other. The next morning, as always, I arrived at the office early. The receptionist greeted me with friendly smiles, and my assistant was already waiting with the day's schedule. Among the appointments, one detail caught my attention. At 2 p.m., I had a meeting with a new manager in the strategic development department. He was a recent employee who had transferred from one of the branches and would now work directly under my supervision. His name, Lucas Andrade. At the appointed time, Lucas entered the room. He wore a sharply tailored dark suit and the same surprised look he'd had the night before. As soon as he closed the door, the first thing he said was, "I swear I had no idea," and he shook his head nervously. "Principal, I'm sorry about yesterday, I was caught off guard." "I didn't know it was your sister." I took a deep breath and interrupted him, maintaining my composure. "In here, I'm just a director. And rest assured, there's nothing to apologize for, you didn't do anything wrong." Lucas sat down, visibly uncomfortable, and we continued the meeting. But something in his expression revealed he was uncomfortable. Before leaving, he hesitated, then turned to me. "Can I just say one thing outside of professional matters? I was embarrassed to be there yesterday. The way your mother spoke to you, that wasn't right." I nodded with a half smile. While those words didn't erase what I'd experienced, it was the first time in many years that someone related to my family had acknowledged, even indirectly, the absurdity of the way I'd always been treated. In the weeks that followed, Lucas became one of the most effective managers on the team. Professional, respectful, and discreet, he never brought up the subject of my family again, but curiosity, of course, lingered. And within me, a uneasiness grew with each passing day. They now knew who I was. They knew they had lied, humiliated, and that it would all come back to them as a distorted and painful reflection. It was a Friday night, almost a month after that dinner, that I received a message from an unknown number. "Could you talk to me? I need to figure things out." "Lucas," I thought about ignoring it. But something told me it might be time to clarify certain truths. We arranged to talk the next day at a discreet cafe in the city center. Lucas arrived punctually, and right after his first sip of coffee, he began, "Amanda," he hesitated, "your sister, she never talked about you. She said she was an only child, that her mother had lost a child in childbirth years ago, and when I asked about her family, everyone seemed to be hiding something." His blood ran cold. I never imagined they'd lie to that extent, erase my existence, make up that I wasn't even alive. I thought it was strange, Lucas continued. "Your father is dry, your mother has an arrogant air, and Amanda, well, she acts as if everything revolves around her. But yesterday, when I mentioned that I worked with an inspiring woman, a competent and admirable director, my mother-in-law laughed. She said she was sure that wasn't you." I had to hold back my emotions, not out of sadness, but because of the irony of the situation. I had worked so hard to earn my place in the world, and they still refused to see me. Lucas then took a deep breath. "They're afraid of you now." Amanda was distraught when she realized who you are. "They said you've always been troubled, that you left home out of pride, that you make up stories to make yourself look like a victim." I didn't answer right away. The silence between us was heavy but necessary. After a while, I said, "The only thing they came up with was this perfect family story. The rest is just the aftermath of the contempt they've harbored for years." We parted respectfully. There was no intimacy between us, just a silent alliance of those who now knew two sides of the same story. And the most curious thing, Lucas seemed to want to distance himself from my sister. He was beginning to realize how much she manipulated everything around her. The irony of life is this: the day they scorned me to protect him from me, it was he who began to question who, in fact, posed a threat at that dinner. And though I didn't yet know how, I realized that this was just the beginning of the twist that was to come. The rapprochement began subtly, almost surreptitiously. Small signs that to anyone else might seem natural. But for me, who'd lived a lifetime of rejection disguised as rigor and a lack of respect for independence disguised as a lack of respect, it was clear there was something behind it. It all started with a short message from my mother one Tuesday morning. "Good morning. Can we talk when you're free? We miss you." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Longing, coming from the same woman who said without hesitation that she felt ashamed just looking at me, I laughed silently. I didn't respond. I ignored it, but I knew that was just the first attempt. And as I imagined, it wasn't long before another one came along. Then another, until a few days later I got a call from my dad's number. "Hi, is this your dad? We've been wanting to see you. Your mother has been talking about you a lot." His voice was hard as always, but now it held a strange attempt at softness that made me uncomfortable. I asked directly, "Why now?" On the other end of the line, silence. It was clear he didn't know what to say, so I was the one who ended it. "I'm in the middle of a meeting, I can't talk." I hung up, but inside me that moment rekindled something. It wasn't pain. It wasn't sadness, it was anger. Anger at knowing that even now, even after everything, they continued to treat our relationship as a bargaining chip. As if now that I was a person, it would be more convenient to have me around. Days later, it was my sister who showed up. Amanda sent me a friend request on a professional social network, the only one where I maintained public profiles out of business necessity. I declined, so she tried by email. "Hey sis, it's been a while, huh? I think we should talk. I know there have been a lot of misunderstandings, but family is family. I really need you right now." The part that caught my attention the most was, "I really need you." What exactly did that mean? It didn't take long for the truth to come out. Lucas called me back to talk. He said Amanda was desperate, that he had discovered she and our parents were having financial problems. A large debt had been incurred in the name of the small company they had started together, an image and etiquette consulting project which had failed to take off. According to Lucas, they owed taxes, employees, and suppliers. And now the bank was about to seize what remained of the company's assets. "She pressured me to talk to you," Lucas confessed. "She said only you could solve it, that if you helped, everything would work out." But I realize now that it's just self-interest. Hearing this didn't surprise me, but it was still painful. Not because I expected anything different, but because confirming that that attempt at rapprochement wasn't from the heart only further exposed the truth I'd always feared. I was never a daughter nor a sister. I was merely a tool, a plan B, a bridge for when everything they'd built crumbled. That night, I went home more exhausted than usual, not from work, but from the memories that kept coming back. I sat on the living room couch and stared at the bookshelf filled with books, trophies, and certificates I'd earned on my own. No one from that family was by my side for any of those victories. No phone calls, no flowers, no congratulations. Everything I achieved, I did alone. And now they showed up because they needed me. Then I received a formal invitation by email, a dinner, another attempt. Signed by my mother, "Dear daughter, we're organizing a family dinner. Just us like old times, we really want you here." Your father is counting the days, Amanda is too. I took a deep breath. The tone of the invitation was almost touching if it weren't artificial. They didn't know I already knew about their situation. They thought they could manipulate everything as before, that all it would take was a sweet request and a hint of longing for me to run back like a needy child. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Lucas sent me one last message that week, "So take your time, but whatever you choose, know that they never understood who you really are." It was strange to receive support from someone so close to my sister, but I realized Lucas was an exception. He was beginning to see through the masks that had always masked that false harmony. I decided not to respond to the invitation, but this time not with the silence they were familiar with. I wrote a short, firm reply, thanking them for the invitation but declining. "I prefer to preserve the peace I've achieved away from you. Good luck with dinner and with your problems." I sent the email and deleted it from my inbox. I didn't wait for a reply. I knew it would come, not in the form of affection, but in desperation. Because now, for the first time, they knew what it was like to lose someone by choice. And more than that, they knew they no longer had power over me. This failed attempt at rapprochement marked a new chapter. Their rejection no longer broke me, but their regret, that would begin to haunt them. The silence that followed my refusal of the invitation was strange, almost deafening. I waited for some reaction, perhaps another disguised attempt at rapprochement, but for 2 whole days, nothing. No messages, no calls, but deep down I knew it wouldn't last long. My family never took no for an answer, especially when they were desperate. And then, on the morning of the third day, as I was reviewing documents in the conference room, my phone vibrated. It was a video call. A familiar number, my mother. The urge to reject it was instantaneous, but something inside me told me to answer. And when the image formed on the screen, there were the three of them, my mother, my father, and Amanda, all with expressions that oscillated between falseness and despair. Daughter, my mother began, her tone laden with a sweetness she had never used with me before. We made a mistake. We know that, we just want you here with us like before, I replied without hiding my sarcasm. Amanda stepped forward, look, I know you're hurt, but we don't have to be like this. Families fight, argue, but in the end, what matters is blood, right? I took a deep breath. My father, who had remained silent until then, decided to intervene with his typical authoritarian stance. You're becoming cruel, daughter. Your mother is suffering, your sister too. We're asking, not demanding. Come to dinner, we need you. The request, even shrouded in drama, sounded more like a desperate plea than a warm invitation. They were under pressure. Debt, the tarnished social image, the fear of losing everything, that was what drove them. Not love, I could have just hung up. But there, on that call, I realized my presence would mean more than just marking my territory. This would be the right time. Okay, I replied after a brief pause, I'll go. They looked at each other in surprise. Amanda even managed a victorious smile. Little did they know that my decision wasn't based on a desire for reconciliation, but on something much more strategic. The plan was already made with Lucas. We talked at length and he was direct. After everything I discovered, everything I saw, I can no longer continue this relationship. Amanda lives in a world of vanity and lies, and I don't want to be a part of it anymore. We decided together that dinner would be the right time to end the play. He would announce the breakup in front of everyone. And me, I would be there in front of them not as the rejected daughter begging for acceptance, but as the strong woman who had learned to say no. There was no manipulation. There's no emotional blackmail, and most importantly, there's no game that always put me at a disadvantage. On Saturday night, I arrived at my parents' house on time. The atmosphere was the same as always, forced smiles, overdone decor, and that constant feeling that everything was a performance to keep up appearances. I was greeted with a theatrical hug from my mother, a cold handshake from my father, and a cynical kiss from Amanda. I'm so glad you came, she said with that practiced smile. I thought you were still hurt. I am, but I came anyway, I replied without looking away. Dinner continued tensely, enveloped in a silence disguised as cordiality. Lucas arrived minutes later. He was calm and focused. No one could have guessed what he was about to do. He sat down next to me, we exchanged a brief glance, and then he stood up, glass in hand. Excuse me, he said, drawing everyone's attention. Before the evening gets any further, I want to say something important. Everyone paid attention. Amanda, in particular, smiled and shifted in her chair, certain he would make a passionate toast, but it was the opposite. I want to thank you for including me in this dinner, but I also want to say that this will be our last meeting as a couple. Amanda, I've decided to end our relationship. The silence was immediate, a second frozen in time. Amanda stood paralyzed without reaction. My parents looked from one to the other, stunned. You've got to be kidding me, Amanda said, her voice rising to a high pitch. I'm not. I spent too much time trying to understand actions that didn't make sense. The disrespect toward your sister, the lies, the gratuitous contempt. I deserve more, so does she, and she pointed at me respectfully but firmly. My mom tried to intervene. Lucas, honey, did you two fight? We can talk, it's not a fight, it's a decision, and nothing will change that. The already tense atmosphere became unbearable, and before the tears and screams could take over, I calmly stood up and said, since we're being blunt, don't count on me to solve your financial problems. I didn't come here to save anyone. Just to make it clear that my life is going very well and without you. My father, blushing, replied, after everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us? Everything you've done for me? He smiled, but without humor. You hid me, lied about my existence, humiliated me, and now you want me to reach out as if I didn't have an entire past engraved inside me? I pointed to my chest. No, not anymore. I grabbed my bags, lifted my chin, and walked to the door. Behind me, I heard Amanda yell at Lucas, my mother sob, and my father curse under his breath, but none of them stood up. None of them came after me. I left that house like someone closing a door with no intention of returning. For the first time, I didn't leave wounded. I left victorious. Inside, I felt a silent peace and a strength that now no one could take away from me. The day after dinner was one of total silence, no messages. No phone call, no attempt at explanation, and curiously, I didn't expect anything else. For the first time, I felt free, not because I'd yelled or exacted revenge, but because I'd finally shown who I was without needing anyone's approval. Dinner wasn't a reckoning, it was a liberation. Lucas also remained steadfast. On Monday, he returned to work as usual, acting as if he had just shed a burden. No one in the office knew about his involvement with my sister, and he made a point of keeping it that way. There was a slight complicity between us, not of intimate friendship but of mutual respect. He knew the weight that night had on me. And I knew how brave he was to end a cycle of pretense my family had been trying to maintain. Throughout the week, I learned from acquaintances that my sister freaked out after the breakup. She spread lies, saying Lucas had been bewitched by me and that it was all part of a Machiavellian plan of mine to destroy her. My parents, for their part, tried to hush up the social scandal, but news of the breakup and the dinner fiasco had already spread through the social circles they so insisted on being part of. Public humiliation was inevitable. People, even the most superficial, commented. Some laughed, others just walked away. I also learned that their company had officially closed its doors. Deep in debt, they had to sell what little they had to avoid legal action. The house they lived in was put up for sale, and the new car my father flaunted was repossessed by the bank. Everything that had ever served to feed their egos was crumbling like a house of cards. And in the face of this, what surprised me most was how, even then, there was no true repentance, only wounded pride. Instead of reflecting on the choices they made, on the years of neglect and rejection, they preferred to cling to the narrative that I had returned for revenge. It was at that moment that I realized something important. They never regretted hurting me. They regretted that I had won. That was what tormented them. The fact that the daughter they had hidden, ignored, and belittled now occupied a higher place than they had ever imagined, and that not even all the false glamour they had cherished would be enough to erase it. It wasn't long before the final attempt came, a letter left at the company's lobby, handwritten in my mother's hurried handwriting. Daughter, I know I was wrong, I know we hurt you, but we are your family. We still have time to start over, forgive your father, forgive your sister. We regret it. The letter arrived folded in three with a dried rose inside, a gesture that in the distant past might have moved me. But now it was too late. I put the letter away in a drawer, not out of attachment but as a reminder. A symbol of everything I've endured, and where I've come despite it all. One Saturday later, I was at home, finishing a report when my intercom rang. It was Lucas. I'm passing by, can I come up? I agreed. When he walked in, I noticed he seemed lighter. He sat on the couch with a small smile. Amanda called me yesterday and he said. He cried, he begged, he said he would change. But there was no truth in her eyes, even over the phone. It was just desperation. That's all they know how to do, I said. When they lose control, they feign regret. But if they had power again, they'd go back to being exactly the same, he nodded. Sometimes I think about how much I endured for fear of being wrong. But after that night I saw everything clearly. We sat in silence for a few minutes, gazing out at the city from the balcony. Then he said goodbye with a respectful hug, a simple but meaningful gesture. That night I slept peacefully, for the first time in a long time, not because the pain had disappeared, some wounds take a lifetime to heal, but because I had freed myself from the need to be accepted by someone who didn't know how to love me. My parents, my sister, they all had the chance to do things differently. They chose to feed a cruel system of favoritism, lies, and appearances. Now they were reaping the rewards. And me, I moved on, no hate, no revenge. Only with the certainty that the love they denied me, I learned to offer myself. The peace I found after dinner seemed solidified. My days returned to their intense but rewarding routine. I was more focused, more confident, and with a new sense of calm. The wound my family left, though deep, had become an invisible yet painless scar. However, what I didn't expect was that, even after everything, they still hadn't learned. That the wounded pride of my parents and sister would be greater than any shred of dignity. And so it was that, weeks after dinner, I received an anonymous email containing forged documents and serious and distorted accusations about my professional conduct. The sender tried to insinuate that I was using my position in the company to secure fraudulent contracts. That I had referred Lucas, a secret boyfriend, for personal gain, and that together we were embezzling funds. It was a dirty, petty, and poorly executed scam. The complaint went straight to the company's compliance department, as was customary. And since board policy requires complete transparency, I was notified immediately. My superiors, all with whom I had a relationship of respect and trust, called me to clarify the facts. At first, I was stunned. Then I was furious, not because I feared losing my job, my conscience was clear and my record impeccable, but because I knew exactly where the scam was coming from. I requested access to the email's source, and the company's security team quickly traced the IP address. The account was fake, but the provider had recorded the initial login made from the house where my parents still lived. The evidence was so clear that it didn't even need to be investigated. To top it all off, the language used in the complaint, full of poorly placed, flowery words, perfectly resembled my mother's rhetoric, who always tried to appear more educated than she actually was. Lucas was called as a witness and gave a firm statement. He stated without hesitation that he had never received any kind of favoritism and that he had been selected based on merit. The board, already suspicious of the motive behind the complaint, quickly closed the case. But now they knew who was responsible. The news, as expected, spread through the corridors. Not with scandal, the company knew how to handle it discreetly, but with the kind of whispering that corrodes reputations. My parents' and sisters' names became known to other employees, especially those closest to the board. What they had attempted not only failed, but also definitively exposed them. The director they had tried to sabotage was now viewed with even greater respect. After all, it's not every day someone survives an attack by their own family, still standing intact. The consequences for them were swift and devastating. The few friends they still had drifted away. Acquaintances, former clients, and even neighbors began to avoid them. Shame consumed them publicly and cruelly, and for the first time they felt the weight of social rejection, just as they had done to me my entire life. Stranded and suffocated by debt and ridicule, they decided to move. A small town where no one knew them. A forced fresh start with hunched shoulders and arrogance diluted by humiliation. I learned of the move through a former neighbor who still texted me from time to time. She said they sold everything they owned for well below market value and left without saying goodbye to anyone. My sister, it seems, was trying to rebuild her life, maintaining the same image of a misunderstood victim. But now, without the support of her family, without her appearances, and without anyone to cover up her lies, she had nowhere left to run. And me, I continued, not with a celebration, not with a victory speech. It wasn't necessary. My greatest achievement was proving that I didn't need to knock anyone down to rise, but that knowing when to say enough was the key to seeing true strength. Months later, I received another letter, a short one. No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable, my mother. You won, I hope you're happy, this time I didn't keep it. I tore it up without even finishing reading. Because true victory wasn't about showing that I'd won, it was about never again allowing myself to be put in the place of defeat. And so I ended this chapter, not with anger, but with the certainty that no forced bond is worth more than the peace of a life built with dignity. The rejected daughter, that's in the past. Today I'm the woman who survived the absence of love and learned to love herself enough to never accept crumbs again. If you were moved by this story of overcoming, rejection, and courage, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the next incredible stories we have here. Now tell me, would you have done what this daughter did? Would you have confronted her parents and sister, or would you have forgiven them after everything? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And please leave a comment here about which city you're watching this video from, because I'll go through the comments and leave a special heart for anyone who shares their opinion. Share this video with a friend who's been through something similar. Maybe they'll feel comforted when they see they're not alone. And remember, never accept less than you deserve, even if it comes from your own family.